July 21st, 1861. This hill that I'm standing on right now, Henry Hill. This becomes the center focal point for a major fight. First Manassas, or Bull Run, depending on which side you're fighting on. After this fight, there would be no doubt that the American Civil War is going to be a very bloody conflict. Before this fight, everyone expected it to be over with in just a few days, and that there would not be much bloodshed. But after this fight and the 5,000 casualties that are out here on this hill and the surrounding area, it becomes really clear this is going to be one of the worst wars in our history. We're here at Bull Run. We're going to take you around to some of the places. Did you know as recently as just a few years ago, they were still uncovering graves and finding bodies out here at Manassas on these fields just a few years ago. Not marked, not cemeteries like the one behind me here in front of this house, but just random graves of Union soldiers left behind on these fields from the Second Manassas. It's pretty amazing what's still out here on these fields. And still today, there are companies, large companies, that are trying to acquire massive plots of land out here on this field, where no doubt they are going to run into graves of soldiers that came out here and sacrificed their lives for their country. Well, today we're going to take you around Manassas and show you this place and what's actually preserved and what's left of the battlefield and some of the markers and things along the way. It's going to be a tour, if you will. If you've never been here before, stay tuned. And I hope if you have been here before, you watch anyway, so that way you can relive that trip. Join us on this trip today to Manassas. Now, one of the some of the markers that you'll see, like the one that's right here behind me on Henry Hill, they are some of the earliest markers out here on this field, depicting a location where some of the soldiers fell. This one is to Lieutenant Ramsey, or First Lieutenant Andrew Douglas Ramsey. And today they actually have a sign out here. It looks like a temporary sign put up in place, with an article from the newspaper that talked about his death. And it says, "Among the slain at Bull Run, we have to announce the name of Douglas Ramsey, of the 1st Regiment United States Artillery, bearing a lieutenant's commission. Fain would we indulge the dictates of a mournful heart in paying tribute to the merits of the gallant deceased, but we falter to attempt to portray in adequate terms his admirable qualities. He did not hesitate to obey his country's call, regarding the Union and Constitution as his liege sovereign, which he had sworn to support, and placed himself in the foremost rank in defense of the Stars and Stripes he so ardently loved, his captain being seriously, if not fatally wounded, having had one horse shot under him and mounted another. He fell himself, his dying words encouraging his men to that duty which he is no longer able to perform." New York Daily Herald, 5th of August, 1861. That's pretty amazing stuff out here on these fields. Now, the sign itself doesn't say that. It just says, "Was killed here 21st of July, 1861, Battle of First Manassas." But those markers that's kind of like, you can come out to this field, maybe take some kids out here and stand in a place and talk about a soldier where they think he died. And these locations are pinpointed based on soldiers' recollections. So it's pretty accurate. And also, the family that used to live on this hill used to give tours of this hill, and they would also mark these spots and tell the story of the soldiers that died out here. So a little something that I just realized on this field. Off in the distance there is the marker that we just talked about, right there, of Douglas Ramsey, soldier that was killed on this field, with a nice brand new sign sitting next to it, talking about a newspaper article about his death. Number one, the first thing that comes to mind is they are talking about the Constitution that he defended. So there again, when James Madison writes this universal document, or helps to draft this universal document and becomes the father of the Constitution, he's drafting something that everybody in the future is going to be picking apart. They are now using that in that wording there in that newspaper in 1861, basically as something that this man is defending, the Constitution. So he is, they are using it for that purpose. Out here, I'm standing next to another sign, and this is for Wade Hampton of South Carolina. It says, was wounded here on July 21st, 1861. So it's another yellow sign here, but there is no sign with any added information. Now, of course, you know Wade Hampton himself is a Confederate soldier. Over here we have Colonel Cameron of the 79th New York Regiment was killed here on July 21st, 1861, Battle of First Manassas. And here is a brand new sign right next to it. And if you go down along the ridge, there's more. There are more brand new signs right next to signs. So I'm going to make my way around this field and see if there's any brand new added signs to the Confederate soldiers that are depicted on these yellow signs. Now, I don't know if you can see a man of dauntless valor right here. I don't know if you can see to read that. But it talks about Colonel James Cameron of the 79th New York Infantry. And it is a New York Times article from the 26th of July, 1861, talking about his death here on Henry Hill. And it reads, "The country mourns the loss of the gallant Cameronian chieftain, the colonel of New York's 79th Highlanders, who fell at the head of his regiment in the bloody battle of Sunday last. Colonel Cameron was a man of dauntless valor, of a sterling and generous spirit, high personal honor, and fine intellectual parts. At once a gentleman, a Christian, and a hero. Only about a month ago, he was induced to accept the command of 1,000 patriotic and gallant Highland clansmen from this city, natives of the land of his sires, which he loved so warmly and well. In his very first charge he fell like a hero, with his face to the foe. At the head of his valiant Highlandmen, he dashed into the thickest of the fray, and shouting an inspiring war cry, 'Scots, follow me,' he passed from the gory field to paradise." New York Times, July 21st, 1861. Now, no doubt that was a fitting and beautiful tribute to a man that fought out here on this field and then died out here on this field. But some of those words that are used to describe this man's death out here on this field is nothing more than a lot of fluffy words to inspire a bunch of people to continue to fight, or to inspire them to join and fight for the cause. There is nothing about a man's death that is glorious in its moment. It is, especially on a battlefield, a man that's being shot and killed and laying in a pool of his own blood, dying. In those last moments, there's nothing that he's doing but gripping the earth and hoping that he can survive. And in that moment, maybe he's just breathing his last breaths, not realizing what's happened to him, and he dies. When he meets that elephant, as they used to say, that's a pretty gnarly thing. and is not something to be depicted in the way that that New York Times depicted it. Okay. And here's another one of those signs that's temporary, a temporary sign put up out here about Second Lieutenant Robert Emmett Hitchcock, United States Marine Corps. Hoorah, Marine Corps. Again, this is another sign talking about a lieutenant or above on this field and his death out here. And in the Vermont Watchman on 20th September of 1861, they held a funeral service and they wrote about it. And it says funeral services of Lieutenant Hitchcock of the U.S. Marines who fell in Battle of Bull Run of the 21st of July. Copious extracts from letters written by the deceased to his parents were read in connection with the sermon and show conclusively that Lieutenant Hitchcock was a young man of high culture, refined taste, and that he possessed a clear and comprehensive mind, duly impressed with obligations to parents, to country, and to God. His last letter was written on the 12th of July after he received notice that he was to take part in the battle. He informed his father in that letter where he had left his clothing, with whom he had deposited his watch and other valuables, and says, "If I never return, make such disposition of these things as you may think proper. If I die, it will be defending the stars and stripes of my country." Now, it's going to be kind of hard to see it today from here because of all the fog. But off in the distance is what we call the Stone House here at Manassas. And I am up on the hill. I'll zoom in here. There it is. Now that's the Stone House. And if you come out here today, there's a busy intersection that runs this way and across. And you can see it right there in front. All the cars. And during the daytime, there's a lot more out there, and they're just zooming past like crazy. If you were here in 1861, that hill way off in the distance there becomes kind of a nightmare for Confederate soldiers. They have gone over there to defend that hill and defend the lands beyond it as hard as they could. And they are being pushed back to the top of that hill. And as they're fighting there, they end up retreating down that hill and then back up this hill. And the artillery that's sitting on this position are firing in support of the fight that's over there. Well, if you're here, you're watching men that are fleeing down that hill and running up the hillside towards you. And it's probably very easy to get caught up in this and try to run. But they didn't run. The Confederate artillery that's here on this hill is under Captain John M. Bowden. He ends up rushing the 4 cannons over here to support that fight. And when the soldiers are advancing in this direction, he continues to fire at top speed. Eventually, he gets assistance. And as the fugitives are fleeing past the Stone House and across the Warrenton Turnpike, the retreating rebels scrambled up the slopes of this hill, Henry Hill, at Robinson's Farms, in search of a place to rally. And Bowden's gunners fired a few parting shots, and then they galloped to the rear. So as they come fleeing up this hill, they fire and return back in this direction. So now the artillery has fled from this portion of the hill, and they're going back towards that portion of the hill. So this is a rebuilt house for Judith Henry, where she would have lived here on this property, on this hill. And it was reported that the cannon fire crashed through the house and mortally wounding the widow Henry, and she was the battle's only known civilian casualty or fatality that day. And by day's end, she would end up dying, and the house would be completely and totally in ruins, and surrounding landscape completely redefined here at this hill. According to what was said, when the artillery was firing, they had no idea that any civilians were inside the house, and they were trying to get rid of rebel sharpshooters that were up here. So they fired cannons towards this house that was on the hill. Now, I don't think it takes a genius to figure out that a civilian house in the middle of a hill might have a couple of civilians inside. There may be a family living in here. Fortunately for them, I guess, there was not a family. There was only poor Miss Henry, who ends up dying as a result of the cannon fire. And not only that, they end up completely and totally destroying the house that used to sit here. There's a photograph, and I'll see if I can't get it and put it up here real quick for you, of what was left of this house by the time Bull Run was over. And there's not much left. It's completely and utterly destroyed. So, regardless of what the reports are of them not realizing there was a civilian here, they absolutely did not care what happened to the home of a civilian, at minimum. And that's the way wars are. That's especially the way this war was conducted. Many civilian properties were completely and totally destroyed by both Confederate and Union soldiers as a part of conducting war. It's unfortunate, though, that the elderly lady was killed on this property during that battle. Now, when we talk about memorials on Civil War battlefields, we're generally talking about memorials are being placed 10, 20, 30, 40 years later by older men, usually elderly men, and they're photographed at these memorials talking about their fellow soldiers that either died in combat or the combat itself, the conflict. This one right here, that's the earliest. June of 1865. Union soldiers returned to this field, many of them who had fought here on this field and survived the entire American Civil War. They had asked to create a memorial here, and they got it approved. So they took materials, they built it with their own hands. Artillery shells are on that memorial that came from actual artillery shells from the American Civil War that they would have used. Fine examples, might I add. And it was placed right here on this hill to make a point. First battle of Bull Run was the jumping off point for the Confederacy. It was that big victory moment that nobody thought was possible, and the Confederates used it as part of the rhetoric to continue that war beat, that drum. They would tell everybody about the great glorious victory at Bull Run and about how they overcame the odds to beat a massive Union army out here. And time again, the story was the same. Smaller Confederate army, large Union army, overwhelming odds, and the Confederates somehow pulled off a victory at this place or that place. So we must continue to fight because we can do it again. Well, the war is over with. The Confederates have surrendered. They are signing their papers, and even during that time, there were still soldiers, Confederate soldiers, that had not signed papers yet, that had not surrendered and not taken the oath of allegiance. And that memorial was put up during that time. I'm going to take some closer videos so that you can see what it looks like and piece it all together here to get a closer look at it. Turns out there is a sign out here for a Confederate soldier. Colonel Barto, Francis Stebbins Barto. They have another sign out here with a newspaper column talking about the soldier that fought. And this one's from the Daily Columbus Inquirer, July 31st of 1861. While the battle was raging, Colonel Barto had ridden up to General Beauregard and said, "Show me what now is to be done, and if human effort can accomplish it, I will do it." The general replied with pointed finger, "That battery must be taken," and he points in this direction. Instantly seizing the standard of his own regiment and accompanied by the Virginia forces, Colonel Bartow led the van of gallant and desperate assault. A ball wounded him slightly and killed his horse. Again mounted, he led the cheered men. The next wound was a ball which entered his heart. His last words were memorable: "They have killed me, but never give up the field." Now, those are words that were reported by someone on the field, probably. Maybe a soldier talking about his last moments said that that's what he said. There's really no way of knowing these heroic moments that these people talk about out here. These are all secondhand stories. Kind of like with Stonewall Jackson when they talk about Bernard B. There's a bit of a controversy around how he got his nickname and whether or not Bernard B. was being sarcastic or if he was being flattering to the Stonewall Jackson on the hill. Bernard B. was fighting and in the fray, and he looked behind him and he sees Stonewall standing up here on this hill, and he says, "Look, there stands Jackson like a stone wall." Some took that to be non-flattering, stating that Jackson was stuck in the field and that they needed his help, or they needed him to get into the fight. Others took it as very flattering. They ran with it. And the man who created the name for Jackson is nowhere to be found because why? Well, he's dead. He can't tell his own story. Now, earlier we talked about a marker being out here up on the Henry Hill for the Union soldiers, being one of the first markers to be placed on the American Civil War battlefields. The earliest known marker to be placed on an American Civil War battlefield is where I'm standing right now. And it is Francis Bartow marker, which would have been placed right here, probably on top of that stone. There's nothing out here to indicate that that is the base of the marker. But if you look at the top of the stone, you can see this circular shape. What looks like a stone shaft may have been placed on top. And that's what was out here on this field during the American Civil War. It was shortly after this battle that Francis Bartow's death was memorialized out here on this field with a cylinder-shaped shaft. And as you can see here on this sign right there, that's what they think it looked like. According to that shape over there, that would have been a lot smaller than this picture, but this is where it would have been roughly placed. And then there's a marker back here that's placed in 1936 to Brigadier General Francis Stebbins Bartow. And it is that stone right there, which looks like a headstone, essentially. And there is writing on the other side of it, words in bronze right there. And I'll take a closer video of this and that stone over there so you can see what it looks like. It's July 20th right now. So in just one day, it's the actual anniversary of the battle. It's pretty cool, the idea that we're on this field at the same time frame. Now, unfortunately, I'll have to apologize for the footage because today it's extremely foggy. And hopefully it burns off here pretty quick so we can get some better shots. But the atmosphere is pretty moist because there's a storm moving in the area too. But really, to think about being on the field where this battle took place in 1861 at almost the exact same date, that's a pretty neat thing. And we're standing here at the base of another monument that we're going to talk about that it doesn't look anything like the other monuments that you'll see on other battlefields. It almost looks like a cartoon character. You'll see here in just a second. I mean, this guy's got muscles like Superman. Now, the one thing that strikes you about this monument when you walk up on it is the muscular physique of Stonewall Jackson standing up here like a stone wall. And it has on the side, "There stands Jackson like a stone wall." And it talks about, or at least it lists the dates of his life on the front here, 1824 to 1863. It is quite the spectacle out here on this field, but it is the one thing that is, besides the house, you can definitely see. It says, erected by the state of Virginia under the Act of 1938, Governor George C. Peary, James H. Price, sponsors John W. Rust, Henry T. Wickham, Aubrey G. Weaver. First Battle of Manassas, July 21st, 1861. And then if you go in a little bit closer there, you can see the name of the author of this work, J.P. Polya. The copyright on it says NYC. It's pretty amazing. It's been out here for a while. I can't say I've ever seen anything like this anywhere else, except for maybe some of the figures in Rome. Just on the other side of Stonewall Jackson is this small marker here, dedicated, it looks like July 21st, 1939. The Mary Taliaferro Thompson Southern Memorial Association of Washington, D.C. And it is for General Bernard Elliott B. of South Carolina. Commander 3rd Brigade, Army of the Shenandoah, was killed here July 21st, 1861. Just before his death, to rally his scattered troops, he gave the command, "Form, form, there stands Jackson like a stone wall. Rally behind the Virginians." And here it is. Now I'll take a closer video so you can see it for yourself. Oh, and right there on the side of that thing is a nasty invader from Vietnam and China. Look at that. These little guys like to destroy crops. They're flying everywhere around here. See if we can get him off of there. Nope. He's like, forget about it. I'm taking a nap. If you ever see those little guys, they have some big, bright, beautiful wings when they fly, and they love destroying crops. All right, back to the history stuff. So this memorial, like I said, was placed here in 1939, and it stands in the shadow of Stonewall Jackson. And there's a controversy that surrounds the naming of Stonewall Jackson. Some people say that Bernard Elliott B did not mean it the way that it sounds. I don't know what to take from that. I honestly don't. It is a fun story to talk about. Bernard B ends up giving his life here. Stonewall Jackson would survive and go on to die at Chancellorsville. So, pretty amazing. '40 rolls around, and there's a lot going on in the country. There's a talk of a possible world war that's on the brink for the United States. There is economic depression of sorts going on, and people need a feel-good thing. Well, the sons of Confederate veterans own this property that I'm standing on, this area here, at the hill that would become the national park for the First Battle of Manassas, and then eventually Second Battle of Manassas. This statue, the Stonewall Jackson statue, is part of a deal. They own the land. They want to convey the land to the National Park Service to create this battlefield out here. But they have a stipulation. We're going to put a memorial. Virginia's going to pay for it, and it's going to be to Stonewall Jackson here on this hill. We will turn the land over to you as long as you can guarantee us that these memorials that we place on this field will stay here, that you will not do anything to try to desecrate the memorials and change the nature of the field that we are turning over to you. The government agrees to it. No harm, no foul. At the time, things are being looked at a little bit differently anyhow. People are talking a lot about lost cause and things like that. So that memorial is unveiled here in 1940, and during the speeches, there is a lot of lost cause mythology that's being presented during the speeches, but there's also talks of the looming war that's ahead and how Jackson can be looked to by the future leaders of the war for lessons on how to handle and conduct yourself during a war and commit yourself totally. So that is kind of the backstory to this statue that's out here on this hill. And if you come out to these fields and you have a certain feeling about any statue, just understand that these things convey a message to today's society too. It is an opposing figure. It opposes the story that's just across the field here. We have a Union memorial that's over here at this house, just behind me. That tells the Union story of their victory here on this in the war, and it tells their story just as much as you have the opposing figure here on this hill. Now, the only people who are responsible for creating a certain type of feeling or memory of this stuff are the people that come out here and see these things. It doesn't project out as much as you think it does. So if thousands of people come out here to this field and there's context on the sign over here that tells the story behind the memorial, then they need to educate themselves when they're reading and learn more about it. If you come out here with the idea that this is placed here for a negative reason, then sure, that's what you'll get from it. But if you also use it as a marker as to where the soldiers may have been, or to talk about what the climate was like in America at that time in 1940, well, then it becomes a completely different story. The memorial stands as a testament to our country and how far it's come and the changes in our nation since then. So I kind of like to look at it from that perspective. Now out here on this field, besides the signs and the memorials that are out here, there's also silent tribute to those soldiers that are marked by the national park. That it's kind of hard to see with the naked eye unless there's water on the ground. Back there behind me is a location that they suppose was probably one of the burial trenches for Union soldiers up here on this field for the Second Battle of Manassas. And they have a marker out here that indicates that, and a picture that shows what it would have looked like back then. It is a unassuming place there on the edge of the field, right near a parking lot. But it is also one of those places when you stand there, you realize just how much power is in this field. And still to this day, they are digging up relics on these fields and putting them in the museum. And unfortunately, every once in a while, they come across another soldier that's out here buried on these fields since the American Civil War. Now, just as you leave the parking lot at the national park and you walk out on the trails, you'll start to see those yellow signs that talk about people that fought out here and died, or were mortally wounded. And here's one right now, Lieutenant William P. Mangum of 6 North Carolina. He was the son of a senator, and according to this sign, he was mortally wounded right here on July 21st of 1861. Just off to my right, I can see Stonewall Jackson's memorial, and I can see Union artillery to my left-hand side facing me here. And the North Carolinians that were in this position during that battle would have been placed somewhere in the tree line there behind me, and eventually would have advanced out into this field, which is why he ends up over here dead. But the fight that they brought to that Union artillery over there is what saved the flank of Jackson. And no doubt Mangum was a part of that fight. He was mortally wounded right here on this field. It was fun checking out the stuff on Henry Hill. We're going to push off from the visitor center here on Henry Hill, and we're going to make our way out to some of the other spots here at Bull Run and bring you along for the ride. So hang on. So we made our way out to stop number 1 from Henry Hill out to the Brawner Farm, which is a location that is on their map, their interpretive map that talks about the fighting for the Second Manassas. And out in this location on the ridgeline is where Jackson ends up concealing his men before attacking the Black Hats out here. One thing I like to note while I'm out here is this sign here has information to help you navigate the field, navigate the park itself. it does appear that it has not been updated in quite some time. Unfortunately, these parks need a lot of volunteers to help them out. Of course, it does also help to get out and look at these fields from time to time to make sure that your facilities are on point and are updated. They have a QR code here that you can scan to let the Park Service know if you see anything that you think needs repaired. There will be one coming your way shortly. And then of course the bathrooms are here at this facility, in this parking lot. So if you got kids and other people with small bladders in your group, stop number 1 is the place, Brawner Farm. Don't forget it. Now I'm headed out to that Brawner Farm area right now for the National Park at Manassas. And out in this area, August 28th of 1862, General Stonewall Jackson's men would have been in the fields here around me. And he had his men kind of concealed behind a ridge line. And he has artillery up on the bridge over here, which we're going to walk out there and show you what is available. This is where the first contact happens, as Rufus King has his men marching towards Centerville trying to find Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson's out here with about half of the Confederate Army in Virginia, and he's got them concealed behind this ridge line that I'm on right now. And all of a sudden he opens fire on the black hats. Those are the darn black hats that everybody talks about. At the time, they were not feared. They did not have that much of a reputation other than having silly looking hats. And these men here were not afraid to fight them. So they opened fire and engaged at about 6 p.m. That night, about a third of everybody that's engaged on this field out in front here become casualties, one way or the other. So just imagine that. Here it is, August of 1862, fresh year, many soldiers marching and fighting. This fight becomes an extremely bloody affair out here at Manassas. Same place where that fight took place, July 21st of 1861. Now, if you've never been out here before, when you take the trail, it meanders through a wooded area, and you're not really quite sure what you're approaching. And then all of a sudden, from out of the woods, is this big, beautiful farm. The nice house that's out here, interpretive signs, and all these cool things for you to check out here on the field. So unfortunately, out here on this property, they have a sign that looks like it probably hasn't been changed since the 1990s. It's talking about archaeological digs. You can see all the cracks and nastiness that's in this sign out here. This should definitely be replaced and updated. But it talks about the archaeological dig out here at Brawner Farm, and you can see the many artifacts that they found here, things from both freed and enslaved people. And here's a pile of rocks that they were supposing to be the rubble from the chimney of one of the work buildings and possibly slave quarters right next to the Brawner Farm house. So here we are early morning in Manassas. I'm standing and looking at the overlook out here, supposedly where Union soldiers made their movement in this direction, and General Jackson was up here on this ridge line and spotted them off in the distance, and according to his own words here on this sign, my command was advanced until it reached a commanding position near Brawner's house, which is the house here behind me. By this time it was sunset, but as the Union column appeared to be moving by with its flank exposed, I determined to attack at once. The firefight ensues out here, and as a part of it, Taliaferro and Richard Ewell are severely wounded out here on this field during this first day's fight of the 2nd Manassas. So imagine, these are some, Ewell specifically is a pretty big name in the Confederate Army going forward in the future. On this field, he could have died out here. This fight was pretty tough. And when the two divisions advance forward, General Jackson doesn't expect the stiff resistance that he gets from the 6 regiments that are in front of him over there, but the stiff resistance he gets, and the fight is on. Even though this is a Confederate victory, it is a hard fought, hard won Confederate victory out here in Manassas. So we're kind of out here to give a brief overview of what there is to offer at Manassas, and we're certainly going to continue to do that because we're talking about places like the Brawner Farm here, and then some of the monuments out here, and give you some more details so you can see it for yourself. But one thing I like to point out is the signs that are on these fields, and out here there's another sign that's talking about John Gibbon. Now these signs that are out here, they don't only point you in the direction of the troops to give you a better understanding of troop movement and what happened in front of you, but they also list the words of the people. John Gibbon's words are on this sign, and he said about this fight, "Finding that the regiment had become badly involved, I ordered the rest of the brigade rapidly up to its support. They moved up and promptly formed the line. Then for over an hour the most terrific musketry fire I have ever listened to rolled along the 2 lines of battle. A sheet of flame seemed to go out from each side." Now the fight that he's talking about here are men that are about 80 feet apart. That's extremely close combat for the American Civil War. It's probably has to do with the timing of the day. It's dark out. Normally they wouldn't want to put themselves in a position that close, but the fight is intense. The Union Army holds their ground here on this field, and they could have been completely routed that afternoon by that surprise attack, but they weren't. This is amazing. And there's a trail that runs out here in front of the Brawner Farm that goes all the way around, and it goes in between the 2 positions where the Confederate and the Union soldiers were. And I'll take you down some parts of this so that you can see it in this video. But you really can't appreciate it unless you're out here. So come on out and check it out for yourself. Now, a minute ago, I talked about how the sign out front there has a QR code asking people to report things that are needing to be fixed, and I'm sure they have a priority of things, fence lines and things like that. But when you see stuff like this, I don't think that's something that you need to wait on the public to report to you as needing to be fixed. This sign, which looks like it's some sort of a composite, possibly fiberglass, is a simple little sign, and I can barely read part of it, and it's giving the words of Colonel Solomon Meredith. A portion of it is completely gone, and it's destroyed. That is from years and years of being exposed to the elements, the sun. This isn't something that happened within the last 365 days, not even something that happened within the last 3 years. This is a sign that's been destroyed over decades. So as you go along this trail here, there are signs like this one right here that give the words of the soldiers that fought up here from the different units on the Union side. And that's on this facing side directly in front of the farm. Now we're going to go to the other side of this hill, which wraps all the way around here, off in this direction. And that's where the Confederate soldiers' lines would have most likely ended up. So now I've reached the point in the field out here of where the Confederates would have been in this conflict on that first day of the Second Manassas battle. And there's a sign out here, and I'll turn around so you can see it. Right there, also in very bad shape. But it has the words of a Confederate soldier that was out here, a Captain James S. Blaine, who was under Major Eli S. Griffin, 26th Georgia Infantry, who was part of Lawton's brigade. And he says, "We were ordered in just after dark. We marched steadily across an open field for about 400 yards, over which the balls were flying by the thousands. When we reached a fence, the men were ordered to lie down. We poured volley after volley into the enemy. Then General Lawton ordered the brigade to charge. The Yankees did fearful execution. Men fell from the ranks by dozens. Still, the gallant 26th wavered not. One volley sent the enemy flying over the hill and into the woods." Imagine you're that soldier coming across this big open field over here, and you're having to march towards your enemy. Then you get to this point, and there's a fence here, and everybody's lying down, and you're aiming. You have the gun placed up against your shoulder, aiming downfield. You have one shot. before you have to reload. Now for you Civil War buffs out there, you know all the steps of loading, ramming it home, putting the gunpowder in, all of that. That's a lot of the work to do from a lying position. But they had to do that. And then finally they were ordered on their feet and ordered to charge forward to try to drive the enemy from the field. This place feels like it's in the middle of nowhere. And I suspect during the American Civil War, it looked much like it does today. Except the fields were cleared because this was a farm after all. This was not a tree farm, but it was an actual production farm. So I'm headed back towards the Brawner Farm now after walking that trail. It's a pretty amazing trail out there. Obviously I can't bring you every little detail. If I did, this video would be longer than my Gettysburg video. But it's a beautiful spot to be and check out. And we're kind of on a time crunch, so we're trying to check out and hit as much as possible to put it in this video about Manassas so you can see what there is to offer out here for your trip. So we're gonna push on from the Brawner Farm, head down the road to stop number 2.